Hi there, Mike Fisher here from the Leadership and Construction podcast. Just before you get into this week's podcast, I want to talk to you about the question that Joseph DiCiano sent me in last week's podcast. He set a question: how do we get leaders to understand that they have to lead first before they do their technical, more normal day job? And so I'm going to try and answer that question before this podcast begins. And for me, we have to first think about what leadership role is, or what a leader's role is. And to me, that's helping create an environment where people that we lead feel safe enough and are able to thrive and develop solutions for themselves. It took me a long time to sort of realize that when I got into a leadership position, a leadership role, that it's not my job anymore to come up with the solutions. It's my job now to help others to come up with the solutions for themselves. And create an environment where they feel safe enough that they can implement solutions. That also includes making sure that they feel safe enough that if they fail, they're not judged and they are supported. So that's what I think sort of the essence of leadership is. How do we get people to sort of realize that that's their first job? Well, as I said before, leaders, once you get into leadership or role or position, that becomes your job, more than trying to solve a technical problem. So how do we get people to understand that? Well, for me, it's leading by example, and that's the sort of basics of it, really. The more people seeing leaders start off by leading and doing that before they do the sort of normal sort of typical day job, others will start to follow and copy by example when they start to see that these results do work. And I will reassure you that it does work. So how do we get people to realize that leadership is their first job? First of all, understand what leadership role is and what it is you've got to do, and then demonstrate that through leading by example. Hello and welcome to the 13th episode of the Leadership and Construction podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and today I'm joined by the absolute brilliant Mike Clayton. Mike is the founder of the online pmcourses.com. So Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
That's my pleasure. So what I want to start off by asking really, Mike, is sort of your background really into project management and any sort of connection into the construction industry.
Yeah, well, my deep background at university, I'm a scientist by training, so I guess engineering is just kind of applied science, really, and I'm from the physical sciences, so yeah. But I started project management really, I guess, as a student in the events kind of side of student life, setting up big events, and I still think of events as a good example to give people when training project managers. I then joined a consultancy, ended up at Deloitte Consulting, delivering some pretty large projects and programs for our clients. And whilst the projects themselves were never engineering projects, I think, to lead an engineering project, you probably need a fair understanding of engineering, whether it's civil or mechanical or whatever type of engineering you're doing, production engineering. And we had a lot of project managers at Deloitte who were very much engineers by background. But I suppose the biggest project that I did that had a substantial engineering component, led the planning and the delivery of the procurement process for the congestion charge in London. So, and obviously there was a lot of heavy engineering going on in there. I also led the program to prepare BAA, who at the time ran 7 of the UK's largest airports, for year 2000. And there was a huge mechanical and civil engineering components of that, largely mechanical engineering. So whilst I'm not an engineer by trade, and I wouldn't manage an engineering project, I've certainly managed projects with a large kind of engineering component to them. But then around 2002, I decided that frontline consulting and delivering large projects, whilst I loved doing it, I wanted to try something else. And the training side of the work that I've been doing at Deloitte was something that appealed to me. So I went into project management training and have been training project managers ever since. So, I mean, I don't know how many people, I've not counted, but it must be in the tens of thousands across the UK and further afield as well. And that's led me to speak on platforms about project management and about other professional, personal effectiveness things like leadership, like general management, communication skills. And as a result of that, got to write some books. So if you look at Amazon, you'll find there's a good dozen or more print books to my name, and a large number of ebooks as well, both that I've published and some of the mainstream publishers have commissioned me to write ebooks. So yeah, got a big background. And then in 2016, as you alluded to, I launched online PM courses to give my training a wider audience. So I put a lot of my training courses onto video and now sell those. But the big thing that I spend my time doing now is, as you are spending a lot of time, is on YouTube. I have the online PM courses YouTube channel, which is all about project management and covers every aspect of project management, and recently started up the management courses YouTube channel, which is designed for young and new managers who want to learn management skills and would otherwise have to go out and buy courses, either online courses or real courses. But for those, particularly, I've got a lot of audience, around the globe who don't have the budget to do that, or who just want to do it piecemeal. I'm putting whole courses onto YouTube for free, funded by advertising. So that's me. I spend my time basically communicating, and largely communicating about project management.
And I can sort of vouch for that. I've watched many of the YouTube videos. I think that's fantastic. That because they're not long videos, not long courses, especially the management ones. They're quite short videos, and they're quick, snappy information, readily available. So if you're looking at racking up your CPD hours or something valuable, these are some great videos to get online and to watch. So where can people find those? Obviously you say on YouTube. What would we be searching for?
So on YouTube, search for online PM courses if you want some content about project management. There's two new videos a week. Tuesdays, I tend to do short videos, which are insights, thoughts, provocations. Thursdays, they're big, meaty interviews, either answering a question around, not interviews, but videos, answering either a question about what something is in project management or how to do something. And increasingly, I'm starting to record some videos rather like the one we're doing now. So there'll be some videos where I interview top project managers. Perhaps you'll join us on that to talk about engineering project management, because I think that would be a really interesting thing for my audience. So yeah, look for online PM courses on YouTube. Look for onlinepmcourses.com if you're interested in written articles about project management on the blog, or buying courses for project managers or for professionals. I've got a lot of professional skills and personal effectiveness courses on there as well. If you're at the start of your management career, or you're looking to move into management, and you're young professional with first management responsibilities, then have a look up management courses on YouTube and take a look at some of the courses that are there. That each course is a playlist, so you can go to the playlist and work your way through the content at your own pace. And as you say, most of those videos are between 5 and 10 minutes long, and by putting a number together, you can get a big chunk of content.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what's really good about sort of those sort of videos, is that and sort of the videos that I would put out on YouTube, as long as a podcast, are going to be about 45 minutes long. So if you really want to listen and know more about the guests and know more about this particular subjects, they're fantastic. But when you really wanted to try and find information quickly and get that information in, and you haven't got a lot of time, those sort of short direct to the subject are fantastic, really, for that.
Yeah.
So thank you for that introduction. I'm really excited to be able to talk to you about project management, because project management is something that I do a lot in my career as well, in the construction side of things, and trying to sort of coach sort of more junior members of my organisation into project management. So can I ask then, what would be your recommendation for people maybe wanting to take a sideways direction in their career, or are just starting off their career? How would they get into project management? What is the best way to do that?
There's a number of routes, but I think the best, if you can, is to start thinking about the work you're doing as projects. I mean, if you're on a project, pay attention and soak up the methodology if you can get some training. But if you're applying for project management roles or junior roles on a project, then start to cast the work you've done. Think about it as, the extent to which it's a project. Start to build a CV around project experience. I think the other thing I'd say is putting your hand up and volunteering is a great way. And whether we're talking about at work, for getting involved in projects that are perhaps additional to your main day job, but organizational projects that are going on, put your hand up for those. And the tip I always give people is put your hand up for the projects that aren't exciting, aren't sexy, aren't the ones that everyone wants to do, because there's a good chance that you'll get onto those very easily, and you can make the same name for yourself on. In fact, actually, more easily, you can make a good name for yourself on a hard project that other people might not want to take on. So do that in the workplace, but also start to build your project experience outside of the workplace. I think one of the big professional bodies for project management globally is the Project Management Institute, based in the US. And I think it is execrable that when you're counting your project experience hours, you're not allowed to count outside of work projects. But and I know that if you're involved in a community project, that can be every bit as demanding as a workplace project. Very different in nature, but you can exercise your project skills. But I still think if you're having a conversation with someone who's thinking of bringing you onto a project with your employer, or if you're at a recruitment job interview, having something interesting to talk about, a real project where you learn some real lessons and developed as a professional. It doesn't have to be in the world of work. It can still be a very interesting and useful experience. So go out and get the experience, put your hand up for things, and look at how you can cast the work you've done in terms of project skills that you've accumulated.
I agree with absolutely everything you just said. I think I sort of see project management as sort of the mechanics of how projects work. And I sort of see almost anything as a project. So I'm converting my garage at the moment into an office space, as I'm sure a lot of people are doing now. We come to work at home a lot more. And, I've got a client who's my wife. So she needs a program of when it's going to be complete. She needs to know that it's going to come within budget and all those sort of things. And I've got to project manage that, manage the
absolutely. If it's got a deadline, if it's got fixed resources, a clear acceptable and a clear unacceptable range of outcomes, and there is more than one task that are interrelated, then it's a project. It's as simple as that. The project management is the bundle of skills that you need to manage that kind of thing. The complexity that arises from the interrelated tasks and the risks that arise from the finite resources that are available and the deadline that you've got. And often we're doing something that we haven't done before when we do projects, and that introduces another layer of risk as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, as I say, what I wanted to talk about was about the sort of term project manager and their role in a project, because I see the term project manager very much the same as an engineer. So it's not a protected term. So an engineer can be the person that comes and fix your heating in your house, but it could also be someone that designs and builds the shard, for example. But I think project management or project manager is a similar sort of way, is that a lot of people can call themselves project manager. And I say I'm project manager, though I have training, but I'm not sure I would necessarily say I could, hold that title, as I can an engineer. And so I want to sort of understand from yourself, really, there was a difference between being a project manager, but being a project manager in its own right, in its own discipline. What does that entail?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that I would guess something like 90% of project managers in the world are not project managers. It's not their job. And I think most of the people who are managing projects, and therefore who are project managers, they are managers in the world of work who have been given a project to lead. So I think that's the first thing. And I think there is a difference. But I like your comparison between engineer and project manager and its protectedness or lack of protectedness. But the English language has had the word engineer and for many centuries before any of the institutes arose, and probably before any of the disciplines that you would call engineering arose. Before there were power engineers, electrical engineers, production engineers, chemical engineers, mechanical, civil, you could probably name all of them. I can't. And software engineers, we mustn't forget them, of course, in this modern world. However, project manager in its real kind of modern use is even newer than that, and therefore we don't tend to when we refer to project managers, we kind of got something in mind. The difference, I think, between engineers and project managers is that when someone refers to an engineer, they've got a big bundle of different things in mind, from the chap who comes to mend your boiler at the house to the person who designs the structural members of the shard, which I think was a woman. I think I saw on TV the other day. However, where a lot of people, when they hear the word project manager, they haven't a clue what we do. It's a term of art in a way that engineers aren't. So what do? I think we take responsibility for making a project happen. That's the long and short of it. And so it is a whole bundle of kind of behaviors and skills that we have that allow us to do that. I think of project management as consisting of a bunch of processes and systems on the one hand, and a number of tools and techniques on the other, and a set of attitudes and approaches to doing things on the third hand, if you like. So as a project manager, we've got a big chunk of things to do, and I would say, and to the point of your podcast theme, we're there to lead the project. And there is a difference between the project management elements and the project leadership elements. But I do think that as a project manager, if you are not leading, then you are not properly managing either. So what do? We define the project. We gather together a team. We understand and engage stakeholders. We work with risk. We build a plan. We execute the plan. We monitor progress. We deal with budgets and resources. There's a whole number of things to do, and I could recommend a good course. But I think that it is commonly said that 80% of project management is communication, and I fundamentally believe that's true. The technical stuff is the easy stuff. Once you learn that, and most of it's common sense, just applied to the needs of your particular project. Once you learn that, the stuff that you keeps testing your commitment to the craft and also testing your ability and skill level is the human side of it.
That's it, and that's what I wanted to really talk to you about. I've met some really great project managers in the past that can really know and understand the intricacies of a program, a critical path analysis. When do we need certain people, certain resources, certain plant on site at certain times, and how we manage that. Great in meetings, but there is that human side to it, which I see a lot less, which is what the leadership side of things. So let's dive into sort of the leadership aspect of project management and being a project manager. What are the sort of skill sets or the attributes that you sort of see that project managers need on a human element of management of a project?
Yeah, sure. I think the first thing has to be self-aware and able to manage yourself. You're in a rapidly changing environment. You're going to be stressed, and you're going to be dealing with people who are stressed. So unless you're able to recognize that and deal with that stress and control that, unless you're able to recognize when a situation is getting more elevated in terms of the emotions that are going on and draw back from it, then you're not going to be successful, because all of that time pressure and all of those stakeholders out there who want different things, who are going to be upset by some of the choices you're going to have to make and implement, all of that is going to manifest itself day to day as anger, upset, frustration coming at you. And you've got to make things happen, and things won't always go the way you plan. So you're going to get angry, upset, and frustrated. So step one, skill one is to recognize what's going on inside you, and skill two is to be able to control that. I always think of the time when I was a junior consultant, and I'd worked a long, hard day in London and had to be in York, and drove up to York, got to the hotel very late. The receptionist told me that there wasn't a room booked for me. And there was only one person in that entire situation who could fix the problem for me. But being young and stupid, I shouted at her. Now, happily, her level of professionalism was higher than mine, and she still fixed it for me. She still managed to find a room. But if you can't control that, you're going to get into trouble. You've got, in the kind of heavy engineering world, you've got, often a large team of very skilled people who have very low tolerance for your stupidity. And certainly in the corporate world, where I've done most of my projects, you have a bunch of people who think they're a lot smarter than you are, and a certain proportion inevitably will be. And you've got a lot of people who are senior to you. You're often, as a project manager, managing teams with more senior people in. You're managing stakeholders who are a lot more senior than you. All of those people can make your day a really bad one if you lose control of your emotions, and therefore of your ability to operate well. So I think it has to start there. After that, everything else is about the skills that you can deploy, and the leadership skills, I think, are around good communication, keeping people on board, keeping people motivated. There's a whole piece around inspiring and giving people an understanding of what it is that the project is trying to do, and why it's important that they participate. Because another thing is that on many projects, you are dealing with a very complex matrix of people coming from different parts of different organizations, all working together. It's very rare that a project manager will have direct authority over even the majority of the people on the project, let alone all of them. So I think influencing skills and your ability to persuade without authority is important. I mean, I could just, keep on listing them. Buy my book, Brilliant Project Leader, and you'll get the whole picture. But I think the big ones are around self-control, self-knowledge, self-control, and communication.
I like that sort of leading or influencing without authority. That's a struggle sometimes, I think. Can we talk about that a bit for a while, about influencing without authority? What would be the biggest tips around that?
Well, the biggest tip is that people will do what they want to do. And so if you're going to lead without authority, you've got to find a way to make them want to do what you need them to do. And a lot of that is about finding what their interests are in the project and relating what you're asking them to do to their interests. The easiest thing, of course, is if you've got junior people on the project who don't want to do a particular piece of work, if you can show that is aligned to their career progression and recognition for their contribution, suddenly they become a lot more enthusiastic about it. So it's about figuring out the alignment between the things that need to be done and the interests that people have. And another thing that I think is always interesting is that with stakeholders who will be quite often able to resist your requests and push back, is to recognize that actually everybody needs to feel control. And as soon as there is a particular big project operating, everyone feels like they are slightly disenfranchised by this project that's happening that they're not a part of. So the other tip I would give in general is to give people a locus of control, even if it's a very small and narrow place to exert control. If they can exert control in one direction, then it lifts from them the burden of not being in control of the situation, and therefore they become a lot more comfortable with the situation and less inclined to kind of push back. But there is, you know, so many tips I could give on influence. I mean, you probably need to take some situational examples, and we could possibly look at those. But I think, yeah, giving people control and finding out what motivates them as individuals. And actually, I always talk about, you know, leadership. One of the four essentials of good day-to-day workplace team leadership are all about four things. And the first of those four things is the individual. You are leading individuals before you're leading a team. So it's not hard, but it is sometimes a stretch because of the timing and because of the personalities. But it isn't hard to get to know every individual on your team, or at least every individual for whom you are directly responsible for, and understand what their priorities are, what they want to get out of it. And if you can do that, then you're better placed to motivate them. Because remember, people will do more for the people that they trust and respect and like than they will ever do for themselves. You know, we all have experiences we can recount of people dropping everything, putting aside all what's important to them to help someone out. If you are that leader that has gone to great trouble to really support your team and to make friends and to become respected by each individual, then when you need it, people will step up and they'll do it willingly. And there's a name for that. It's servant leadership. And if you can be the servant of the team rather than, oh, I'm the boss, so you must do what I say, but actually, no, you're the people who are doing the work. I will do what it takes to make your life easy and to let you thrive and succeed and be recognized for it. Then people will want to work for you and want to do what you ask them to.
I absolutely agree. I mean, I think there's a great piece on your website about servant leadership, and I strongly do believe in servant leadership. And the couple of things that you said there about linking people's values and their beliefs and what they want to do and achieve in their careers or in their personal lives with the goals and the values of the project. We don't really think about it on project level sometimes, especially sort of in construction. You know, they might come around for 6 months to a year to 18 months. What I think a lot of people don't sort of realize, especially in the construction side, is we're leaving a legacy. You know, we lose sight of the fact that, you know, we're building, you know, from in my position as an airport engineer, we're building a new taxiway or you know, a new apron or something like that. It's not just a lump of concrete and asphalt and drainage. We're doing it for society. There's people that are going to use this, you know, this, and that's where it really is. And it's really difficult that if you lose sight of that the people working on the project, either from the design side or from the construction side, that it's a worthwhile project to put your energy into, put all your all into it. I think that's really important. It leads on to what you were saying. So what about, you know, we talked about leading yourself. What about team leadership then, and constructing that team? Because the members of the team and the diversity of that is also quite important. Is that correct?
It is. I mean, diversity in itself is a big topic, but I think the simple answer on diversity for me is that it's a no-brainer. That all the evidence shows that the more diverse your team is, and there have to be certain constraints to the way the team operates, but if you've got a more diverse team, you will get better results. You'll get more innovative, creative thinking, better solutions to problems, and actually more robust and wiser decision making. And I say there are constraints. This can only be true if you set up a culture and a set of processes which harness that diversity. And that's difficult because diverse teams are harder to manage, because if you are not like me, then I don't understand you as well as you understand you. And therefore, you don't understand me, and therefore communication becomes harder. We are tribal as human beings. We've got to recognize that fact, that we have to work at getting on with people who are different to us. However, if we can do that, if we can create a culture where everyone in the team is respectful of one another and respects one another for what they can contribute, rather than deprecating their colleagues for what they can't, then if you accompany that with basic processes about that allow or almost compel people to express their point of view, even if they're the shy one. The brilliant ideas don't naturally fall solely to the people who like to shout. But in too many organizations, those are the people whose opinions carry the greatest weight, because they've got good at putting them across. If you've got a process that ensures everyone's view is heard and has a way to avoid systematic biases like sunflower bias, where everyone turns to the brightest source in the room and takes their point of view from them, and you've got that culture of respect, then your team is set up for great things. And the more diversity is, then you can start to harness that diversity and get different ideas and build things. So yeah, I think diversity is one of the greatest pleasures of working in a high functioning team, is soaking up all that richness of cultural, of perspective, background, whatever.
There's a couple of things there, because the hardest thing when you have a team is when the team aren't gelling and aren't working, and there's maybe a bit of conflict or disagreement. So we'll come back to that in a minute, but that's about the evolution of the team and getting the team through these sort of development stages. But I wanted to add on to what you were saying there. Something that I found really sort of difficult when I sort of went into more management and leadership role was when I was leading a team, is that I was still in problem solving mode, still trying to solve the problem, trying to use all my technical skills that I'd spent years gathering to solve a problem, and forgot that I was in a team and that I needed the views and the valuable thoughts and of the collective rather than just of myself. And what that did was it stifled people. People didn't want to speak out. People stopped speaking out. Relationships started to break down. So it's really important that once you've got a team together, it's actually just to listen and value their inputs. And as a leader, my view is always to sit back and just not say a word, not even show any inkling of agreement or disagreement, but to listen to absolutely everybody else. And if you set that up from the start, I think that kind of really works. But I think you did a piece on this a while ago, which maybe do more research into it, which was about groupthink and we can talk about that a bit more. But about the teams, when you get together, naturally go through this process of not don't want to say believing each other, but not trusting one another at the start. And I think it takes evolution. You've got to go through the motions to sort of get them into a stage where they can be open, share ideas, listen to one another's ideas, really respect other people's ideas. And it takes a lot of work. I mean, is that correct?
It is. I mean, and I think it's one of these things that the reality can be complex and messy, but the principles are straightforward. And we've known about them for years. The best model, I think, where I point people who want to start thinking about building a team up or fixing a team that's broken, is to start with the Tuckman model, the model that says teams go through stages from forming to storming to norming to performing, and then onwards to either transform or to mourn as they separate. And that model, I think, hits the perfect sweet spot, because some models are ridiculously simple. They're easy to understand, easy to remember, but they don't explain a lot and they don't predict a lot very accurately. Other models are very sophisticated, very complicated, hard to hold in your head, but they're very, very powerful. Right in the sweet spot, I think, we've got this marvelous model that Tuckman gave us, which is enormously powerful as a predictor of what will happen, as an explainer of what does happen, and yet really easy to understand. And it's got this fantastic kind of rhyme scheme to it that Tuckman himself said is probably the reason why it's the best known model for groups. I think he's doing himself a disservice. I think it's the enabling is very clever, but the understanding that he crystallized into the model is perfect. And although you need to look at the model in great detail and really understand the subtlety to it, when exceptional things happen, the model doesn't invalidate the model. It just means you've got to look more subtly. But basically, when teams start off, when you get a new bunch of people together, the key thing to recognize, they don't know each other. They just want to get on with the job. When we meet someone for the first time, we don't want to have a deep, meaningful conversation with them, nor indeed are we ready to trust them with complex tasks, collaborating on complex tasks. So as a team leader at the beginning, you need to really focus your team on you do this, you do that, clear, precise instructions that play to their abilities. That allows people to size one another up and get to know one another as they work. And that's when personalities come out and people start to have a, go at each other. The more assertive people try to kind of lord it over the rest. The less assertive people will perhaps try and find a comfortable niche. Everyone's trying to find a friend or an ally. And some people are probably going to push against your leadership as well. So at this stage, the storming stage, it is necessary that as well as keeping people on task, you also work hard to support the relationship building and protect the people who might otherwise feel threatened by the more pushy, assertive team members, to defend your own leadership style. Be confident against anyone who tries to challenge that, and get the measure of people so that you can give them roles that don't just play to their skills, but play to their personalities and their preferences as well. And that intense kind of social stage of the team will settle down because it's psychologically very exhausting. And after a while, people will know what they're supposed to do and they'll just be relieved to be able to get on with it. And that's the norming stage where the team settles down, does good work. And your role there is to stop telling people what to do because they don't need to know now. They've kind of figured it out. So if you tell someone who knows what their job is to do what their job is, they'll just think you're an idiot or that you don't trust them. So let them get on with their work, but now start to build the relationships amongst the team and start to build that culture, what psychologists call norms of behavior, and hence the norming stage. So that's where you really impress upon people the way we're going to do things and the way we're going to treat one another. And you exert your leadership by creating that structure and reinforcing the behaviors you want and dealing with the behaviors you don't. And that's the way that when people start to trust one another and trust you, they start to morph into this performing stage where the team needs a very light touch. It does not need being told what to do. It does not need you to support the relationships. They will care for one another and collaborate with one another and resolve their conflicts largely amongst themselves. And that's where you can take a step back. And that's the kind of light touch leadership that makes space for true servant leadership, where your only real job as a team leader is, on the one hand, to feed them the information, the resources, the tools, the equipment, the materials they need to do their job right, give them an environment where they can get on with things, if you like, and on the other hand, to protect them from the crap that organizations throw at us. You work for a big organization. I used to work for a big organization. You sometimes can't move for administrative emails. If you as a team leader deal with those so that your team doesn't have to, they can get on with their job and they can do things. And you only need to step in for the exceptional cases where the conflict escalates too high or there isn't clarity about what we need to be doing next. And that's, so I think if you understand that, and you understand that a team will storm, and if you bring a team together too quickly and they go straight from forming to performing, which can happen when you're under pressure. You may have been in a team where you've come together and you've just quickly had to get something done, and you do it. But then if the team stays together after the pressure is off, then they start to bite at each other, and the storming phase comes. So if people understood this model and worked to it, then I think we'd see a lot better leadership, because the model tells us exactly what style of leadership is needed for each stage of the team's evolution and maturity.
I mean, that is all 100% spot on. I mean, I've heard of a very similar model that I've read into, called, which is the situational can't get my words out today. That's it. From Kenneth Blanchard. You know Kenneth Blanchard? Heard of him? Yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, yes. So Blanchard is the owner of Situational Leadership 2.
Yes.
As opposed to his Situational Leadership 1, which is Ken Hersey. They together developed situational leadership, but that's an evolution of other models like the Fiedler model or the Tannenbaum-Schmitz model. Yes, you're absolutely right. What I've done in interpreting the leadership style for a team is use a similar framework to the Blanchard framework for diagnosing the leadership that's appropriate for an individual at different stages of their understanding of the task and their commitment and enthusiasm for it. And we need to be a little careful about how much we talk about that, because they're one of the more protective organizations over their trademarked terminology and name. But I think you're absolutely right. People who understand situational leadership will get this straight away.
What was the name of the model that you use again?
Sorry, no, I mean, there are many situational leadership models out there. I think. Sorry,
no, I meant for the team. Fiedler, did you say it was called?
Oh no, the team model. Well, no, the team model is just applying the same thinking to the Tuckman model. Of group development. However, if people want to kind of read about it, I think a good explanation of this, Ken Blanchard's series of 1 Minute Manager books. Leadership and the 1 Minute Manager explains the situational leadership model that you've described. I think it's the 1 Minute Manager leads teams or leads
high performing team. We've read the same book.
That applies the leadership, the situational leadership model to teams, although it doesn't use the terminology of the Tuckman model.
I think that's something to look into.
Bruce Tuckman is the forming norming story. Americans, I think, call it the Orming model because of the rhyme, but it's just the Tuckman model.
Because I think that's a really good one to look up. I say that the Kenneth Blanchard books, which I think is fascinating, and I tell everybody about it, because these are the books that I started off reading when I started my journey of leadership. And the reason why I started reading those is because it's the same books that the books I heard from my dad, that he started reading in a similar sort of age and position to me back in the late 80s, early 90s. So they're relatively old, I don't say old books, older books, 30 years old, but the same principles apply. They work today as they did 30 years ago.
I mean, I don't know how much of your audience is British or whatever, but I think they are great. I mean, I've got somewhere just behind me they're up there somewhere, but I've got pretty much all of the 1 Minute Manager books and the books in the series that don't have that. And
they are great.
I think the thing is they are short, easy to read books, and I think too many British managers don't read them because they are told as stories, and they're a little bit kind of folksy in their style.
I think that's the great thing about
can grate on people. However, the information they contain is brilliant, and if you've got a commute, nobody has a commute these days. We're the lockdown, but if you've got a commute, you can probably polish one off, read half of it on the way to work and half of it on the way home, or better still, read half of it one morning and the other half the other morning. Don't try and read when you're tired.
I think it is necessary that they're that short and that like a story, because I have dyslexia, so I do struggle reading books. It takes me a long time. You talk about reading that half on the one way, half the other. It's weeks for me, but because it's written in such a style that it's a story, in such a style that it isn't too technical language. I can just feel like I can sit down and read it, and I'm getting this now. So it was best books for me to start off my journey with. And I model a lot on what I do in my day-to-day life on the books I've read. I think that everybody does that, and I just happen to have read the ones from Kenneth Blanchard. So no, that's brilliant. Tugman is definitely something. I think he may have mentioned it in that book, but I'm going to go and look it up now. I'm going to do a bit more research into that.
I from recollection, they don't actually specifically talk about Tuckman.
Okay.
I may be wrong.
Cool. So no, that's absolutely brilliant stuff. I really do appreciate that. What I wanted to do really is we're getting to the point of the show where we're going to need to sort of start thinking about wrapping this up, unfortunately. But one of the new things that I ask from the guests is to pose a question to me, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to answer that at the beginning of the next one. So as the start of this podcast, I answered last week's question. Next week I'll ask this week's question. So Mike, have you got a question for me that you'd like me to answer next week?
Yeah, I'd be interested to know your thoughts, coming from an engineering background, but perhaps generally, on the leadership role in the governance of a project and what role leaders have in ensuring project governance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really important topic, actually, because sometimes I think a lot of it can get in the way sometimes of making things flow quite smoothly. Is that your experience?
I want to hear your answers. You invite me back on to talk about project governance. It's a bit of a hobby horse of mine, and I'll talk for an hour on project governance. But
well, that's the next episode. Okay.
Yourself on the spot. I should be marking you out of 100.
Great. You'll have to give me feedback then when the next episode comes out. Fantastic.
I'm sure. I mean, but I very deliberately framed it. Your experience of engineering, because I don't have experience of engineering projects, and we can only really speak from our own experience and our own situations, and it's for other people to assess critically whether the advice we might give from our background applies to their background. Because whilst I think a lot of what I've said about leadership is applicable across a lot of projects and a lot of functions and disciplines, including engineering, the reality is my experience is in business consulting and business projects. So your listeners, who I guess are mostly engineers, but may come from a range of different backgrounds, need to filter that through their experience. We should never, do not, I think it's an important leadership trait, do not accept anything you hear from someone on YouTube or the TV or even in a book as prominent as Ken Blanchard. Don't accept it as being true. Assess it critically and look for evidence that either supports it or contradicts it. And if you find too much evidence that contradicts it, then just abandon that idea and look for the next iteration that fixes the problems that you find.
That's really important as well. That is true. I mean, I think everything I read around leadership and project management don't relate to construction. You've got to be able to sort of link the two yourself, and how is it applicable in the scenario that you're in. So fantastic. So I want to wrap this show up with my sort of final question for you, Mike, which is, what do you think is the most important aspect of leadership?
The most important aspect of leadership, I think, has to be recognition that it is a discipline around people, and therefore, to be a good leader, you have to make people the subject of your learning. People that you lead will be fine if you don't have a grasp of this technical fact or that methodology, if you know how to work with them and harness their knowledge and harness their skills and experience, and you've got the critical skills to evaluate what you're being told by different people and synthesize that into a sound decision. But if you want to lead people, you need to make a constant habit of learning more about how people work. I have met so many people in business and leadership professional disciplines like yours, like mine, who have had no formal training in psychology, but have spent years reading about psychology, listening to psychologists on podcasts, watching them on videos, because that is the stuff of leadership. It is leadership is about harnessing how people tick so that you can get the best out of them. So I you were saying, earlier on that you've got to cure people who want to be on your show, quite rightly so. But you've also got, at the back of your mind, who do you want to have on your show? And I'd encourage you to invite psychologists onto your show, people who understand aspects of how people function, because that's what we need to know. I probably read as much about psychology in the last 10 years as I have about project management, probably a lot more actually, because I kind of figure the stuff project managers write about project management is very familiar to me. I've written a lot of it myself, but there's always something new, a new way of thinking about how people operate, and there's just so much there. So most important aspect of leadership is understanding how people tick.
Absolutely, I could not agree more. Mike, thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it.